everybody. Welcome to the first episode of Alter Egos. So this is going to be our comic book related show. Sometimes debate, sometimes agree, sometimes we just discuss things. With me, my co-host, Anthony Arviso, all the way from California. What's going on, man?
What's up, dude? It's hot.
Yes it is. So, I got you on here because I know that you are, at least in my small circle of friends, the comic book guru of my group. So, me being the guy who's kind of been raised on the movies and slowly getting into the books, you're the guy who was raised on the books and getting into the movies. So, right. Why don't you go ahead and start off telling me what got you into comics in the first place?
I was a Star Wars kid growing up. I'm not old enough to have seen the first two movies, but I saw Return of the Jedi in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
So from that, one time I was with my mom. I want to say we were at a Toys R Us or something, and I saw a Star Wars comic book. And at the time, Marvel was publishing it. This had to be like 85, maybe 84.
Mm-hmm.
And I picked it up. I cracked it open, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Because this is nothing like the movies I remember. There's a giant green rabbit. Never seen in the movies. He looks stupid. I'm never reading comics ever again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Flash forward maybe, I don't know, a few years later, my second comic was Archie was publishing the Ninja Turtles comics, based more on the action figure line and the cartoons.
Okay.
And I cracked it open, I read it, and I'm like, again, like, okay, why is Raphael all black? Why is this like this? Why is this different? I don't like it. It's different. Stopped reading it. Flash forward to like the early 90s, and it was around the time when Tales from the Crypt was on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always loved horror, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a horror junkie. So I used to watch the show even though I was way too young to watch it. And one day my mom comes home from work with a Tales from the Crypt comic. Mm-hmm. And it was a Gladstone reprint that from the old EC 50s series of Tales from the Crypt, and cracked it open, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I loved horror. It actually made me like appreciate horror again at that time. I had to be about probably 11.
Okay.
And I wanted more. So I went. Come to find out that I had a friend in elementary school who also loved comics and also loved Tales from the Crypt. So we had this kind of bond, and we bonded on horror, we bonded on Tales from the Crypt, and we bonded on the local comic shop. It was called Comic Cult 2. It's in Norwalk, California. It's closed now. Actually, it'll be a year in November since it closed. But it's been open since I was 10 years old. And we would regularly go there. And then from Tales from the Crypt, I'm like, well, let's check this out. And the comics that kind of kicked me in was Wolverine. Okay. It was Wolverine number 37, and it was at the end of a storyline with Lady Deathstroke. And I was hooked, dude. You know, the art was great, and I love to draw, so like I was just drawn to art.
Mm-hmm.
The story was confusing because I'm like, who's this, who's that? And it was literally at the end of a storyline, so I'm like,
it's like walking in the last 10 minutes of a movie.
it really is. But you know what? There's kind of this saying that goes, you know, when you start reading comics is, no one is gonna read Superman from the first issue.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so much before now. You're not gonna just jump in and read Action Comics number one. It's not gonna happen. Mm-hmm. It'd be stupid because it's totally different. But it was like a baptism by fire. I started learning who's Mojo, who's this character, who's the Hand, who's Sebastian Shaw, who is Wolverine. Like, I didn't know. I just jumped right into it. And then from there, I dove into the back issues at my comic shop and got X-Men number 1, started reading Spider-Man. I got into DC Comics. My friend Jeff Hughes, if you're listening, I have no idea what the hell happened to you. You know, get in contact, dude. It's hard to find Jeff Hughes because that name is so freaking common. So, I can't Facebook him or anything. Anyway, I would go to Jeff's house, and his dad was a collector. And, you walk into his den, and, like, I'm a 11-year-old kid, and I'm, like, looking around, and I'm like, this is amazing. His dad had original Wolverine artwork. His dad had a poster of Revenge of the Jedi.
Oh
It
wow.
wasn't even released. He had one,
Hmm.
and dude, he had shelves on every wall in the den, and I'm like, I want to be this dude. And then the thing that always struck me, as a kid who started getting into comics, was his dad had a recliner. This is boss's shit. His dad had a recliner, and right next to him, he had this little side table that had just a stack of comics. And I'm like, Jeff, what's that? And he's like, oh, that's my dad's stack. That's what he reads like every Thursday or Friday. And I'm like, holy shit, that's awesome. I want that to be me.
That's my leave me alone spot.
Dude, totally. And his dad was like a pretty like serious guy. He was pretty quiet and to himself, but like, he appreciated that his nerdy son had a nerdy friend who liked the same nerdy shit. So
Yeah.
it just blossomed. It never really left me. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it later, but there is fatigue when it comes to superhero stuff. But if you love it, you always come back to it.
Yeah.
And I'm back to it now. So, I had when I was living in Savannah for those 3 years, I wasn't really reading. So, I came back to California and started reading again, and now I have kids, and then they love superheroes and stuff, so it's like pulled me back in, Godfather style.
Yeah, I hear you. Got you back in. Yeah, I always I don't remember what my first kind of exposure to superheroes was. I mean, I think when I was a kid, I was born in 1990. Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, I think a lot of those things were just kind of understood from birth. It was like these things are out there. And the only thing that as early back as I can remember was Batman the animated series. It was probably my biggest draw into comics when I was a kid. And obviously I grew up in the times when we had the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, and when I was that young they were cool. But you wouldn't get a whole lot. You'd get a superhero movie maybe like 2 or 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, and they weren't always guaranteed to be good either.
Yeah, exactly. And they weren't really expected to be good then either. It was just kind of like, what is this superhero shit? I think Batman and Superman were probably the only two that were ever expected to have some quality to them. And then, fast forward to now, what kind of jumped me into actually reading comic books, and I have no idea why it took me so long to get into it. And maybe it was just stubbornness when I was young, not wanting to read. I'd rather watch the cartoon, and probably just getting complacent with it as I got older was actually Batman v Superman, because I'm a Batman whore. I love all the superheroes, but Batman's always the one that has interested me the most, being that the animated series was what kind of stuck me into superheroes when I was young. And I had just got done with Batman Arkham Knight. And then I was really looking forward to Batman v Superman. I mean, me and you were talking about it probably from the time it was announced until the time it came out, about, what we like, what we didn't like, what we were worried about, what we're hearing about it, stuff like that. And then I think I went and saw it first. And I remember I messaged you. I was like, oh, dude. And, I told you some of my issues about it. And then I'm sitting around and I'm like, fuck. I'm like, now I have a Batman itch that I can't scratch because the movie disappointed me. So I think it was within a week I walked into Barnes & Noble and I was like, I'm going to pick up some damn comics. And I bought Batman Long Halloween, I bought Batman the Killing Joke, and I bought Batman Hush.
Right.
And I read everything except for Hush. And then by the time I read the Killing Joke. I mean, that's a fast read. And then I read The Long Halloween when I had a Saturday by myself, and I read it in one sitting. And I was like, I got to get some more of these things. So then I went on Amazon and I ordered Flash. I ordered Justice League. I ordered, Punisher. And I had messaged you, was like, dude, what comics do I need? And you're like, Preacher, Preacher, Preacher. So I got Preacher. I got some of the other Garth Ennis stuff. I got stacks of stuff. I got Walking Dead, all kind of things. And for at least, I'd say 4 or 5 months there, every single night when I used to pop in a movie or pop in a TV show, I was reading. And it was like opening up this whole new world that I never knew existed. And it was pretty crazy. And it's kind of, with some things that I thought that I knew really well from watching the movies, watching TV shows, it was like, damn, now I know. I was always on the other end of, people are like, man, the books are better. And I'm like, I don't know, man, the movie's pretty cool. And then now I watch, like Walking Dead, for example, I'm like, man, what the fuck are they doing on that TV show? Now that I'm reading the books. So it was kind of a cool, seeing the grass is greener on the other side kind of situation. But there are some things that I think the movies do pretty well. And so what I was going to get into next is, at least in your opinion, we'll kind of do a little back and forth, is I know you have mixed feelings about a lot of the Marvel movies, and I know you have, mixed to negative feelings, which pretty much everybody does, about the current DC movies. So what do you think that, now that we're in this huge superhero movie craze, what the movies tend to get right about the comic characters and the stories, and what they tend to get wrong?
First off, I want to say you're the shining example of what the comic book publishers want. They want you to see these movies. They want you to go buy their books.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfect. I love that because now we can talk. We're having this podcast, right? You know what I mean? Like, we can talk about comics.
Exactly.
Comics have always been something that I think, God, I wish more of my friends got into.
Mm-hmm.
Because even friends that I'm really close with don't read.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell somebody, pick up a fucking book, But,
yeah, I used to have to be that guy, too, where I'd have to pull from my video game and comics, or my video game, movie, and, animated series knowledge. I'd be like, yeah, man, they're talking about comic stories, and I'd have to jump in the conversation like, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
But now I actually can back myself up a little bit.
Well, yeah, no, that's good. It's good. You expanded it, so you know where they're drawing from.
Exactly.
As far as what sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. As far as what the movies do right, it seems like, I'll start with Marvel. They, even though they tend to wander off, and create their own universes, their own cinematic universe, I should say, from, canon, they respect the characters for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Captain America acts like Captain America. Iron Man acts like Iron Man. They threw a curveball with the whole Mandarin thing, which kind of pissed me off. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you're getting the feeling. Like, it's the feeling. If anything, it feels like the Ultimate Universe version, especially the Avengers. That's why I have high hopes for Spider-Man, because it seems like they're doing the right things with it.
Yeah.
When Sony was just dropping the ball with it.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
My only concern with it, maybe right now as far as Marvel's concerned, is how far are you really going to take this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the Infinity War is now one movie.
Yeah, that's what, and we're gonna get into that in a little bit too. But yeah, that's a good point, because I was wondering the same thing. I'm like, at first they made it just seem like they were gonna have different taglines, like, okay, Avengers Infinity War, the beginning. And then
right.
Avengers Infinity War, the aftermath, or something like that. Just, obviously then think of something better. But then, yeah, they just cut it off. Okay, this one's Avengers Infinity War, and we have Untitled Avengers sequel later on. Uh-huh. And it's like, so we've been building up to Thanos and the Infinity War since 2008, and you're going to solve it all in 2.5 hours?
Right.
So yeah, I hear you, and I have the same concerns. Even if they do, I still have sneaking suspicions they're going to keep that storyline over 2 movies somehow. But after that happens, where do you go from there? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very, very big story. I mean, where do you go from there? There's, gosh, I really wish Marvel had control of the X-Men, because there's so many storylines they could do and better than what Fox is doing. But that's neither here or there. What I also appreciate that Marvel's doing is they are making movies based on properties that aren't super popular. Guardians of the Galaxy, who the hell knew, other than us who read comics, who the Guardians of the Galaxy were?
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, but it drew interest, and it showed people that, no, these characters are interesting. Even Iron Man. Iron Man was not a popular comic at the time they made the movie, but that movie, brought back interest in Tony Stark and his character.
Exactly.
So, like I said, it all kind of goes back to they're respecting their properties. They seem to have a clear vision of where they're going, and they're bringing in new readers, man.
Mm-hmm.
I used to, for a split second, I worked at Barnes & Noble, and even though I worked in the DVD department, they would have me ring, people who bought books or whatever. A lot of graphic novels were being bought, and especially around the time when, Guardians of the Galaxy came out, which was around the time I was working there part-time. There was a lot of interest, and people would ask me, like, oh, you read comics? Like, what else is good? And I would recommend them, different things, and again, bringing in readers to comics is important because these creators don't get paid the bucks that the actors do to play the characters.
Oh yeah, not even close.
You want to give them their due.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So what do you think about the DC side?
DC seems to be very, very split because their animation department is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Their TV department, which I didn't even get with Marvel, I'll get back to that. I'll get back to TV. Their animation, their animated films are great. But it's almost like it's splintered off from how great their animated shows were back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The Batman animated series, even the Superman animated series, Justice League Unlimited, all that stuff was great. And it's almost like it just kind of carried on into their animated movies. Not the same style, but definitely like the tone. And they had kind of like this template to draw from.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they stay incredibly faithful to the characters. Now, as far as the movies go, I think it's no surprise or no secret anymore that it really feels like Warner Brothers is getting in the way.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers has owned DC Comics for a long time now, but it's almost like they're scared. Until recently, they put Jeff Johns in charge of the DC Cinematic Universe, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like they're really respecting their characters, or they don't have faith in their characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate because they have, in my opinion, the most iconic characters. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. How do you fuck this up?
Yeah, that was the thing with Batman v Superman that was so disappointing. It was, a lot of people walked out of Man of Steel very divisive. I was one of the few people who really, really liked Man of Steel, but I admit forefrontly that I am not a Superman fan. I never liked Superman when I was a kid. I never liked the animated series. Superman to me was always like a Swiss Army knife kind of superhero. Like he had a way to get out of everything, which I know is wrong, but at least coming from a little kid, I was like, this guy's got so many superpowers. He's got, he's got ice breath and laser eyes, and nothing can hurt him. And it was never interesting to me. So, and I never grew up on the Christopher Reeve movies. The first Superman movie I ever saw was the one with Brandon Routh, which I hated.
Oof, ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Superman's interesting for me because when people ask me, like, who were the two biggest influences on your life, I would always say Superman and Jesus. Because I was just a good kid, dude. I was just an old Boy Scout when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Superman, I used to watch in syndication. They would show the old black and white George Reeves Superman. Mm-hmm. So I grew up watching those. And I loved the first movies. I loved the Christopher Reeves movies. Mm-hmm. So I was always, growing up in the 80s, Superman was everywhere. Because of those movies, I had probably Superman underoos. I know I had Superman sheets. I know I had shirts with Superman on it.
Yeah. Even
though I wasn't reading comics. I mean, it's like my kids. My kids don't really read comics, but my son has Avengers underwears. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Or whatever. And he plays the Lego games. So it was just such a part of the culture back then in the 80s. And then once Batman came along, in the late 80s, Batman became a big part of the culture. We were getting reruns of the old Adam West, series, and I've always been a Superman fan. It's always just kind of stuck with me. I'm pretty sure when I was a kid, I got hurt because I tried to fly. Because I was a dumb kid in the 80s who was bored and didn't have video games yet.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
I walked out of Man of Steel thinking, wow, this is a Superman that I can actually get into. Because to me, I know it pissed off a lot of hardcore comic fans because of some of the decisions that they made as far as like getting real scientific about his suit and how he flies instead of just letting it happen and just let the audience accept it. And, how everything turned out with him and General Zod at the end of the movie. But to me, it was much more of a grounded, realistic what's the word I'm looking for? A vulnerable Superman.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of what Zack Snyder was going for at first. Now, when it carried into Batman v Superman, I think a lot of people's worries, at least before I saw the movie, I attested to, okay, well, these are all the people that really didn't get behind Man of Steel, and they're worried that he's going to take it even farther. And, Ben Affleck was cast, and everybody was freaking out about that. I thought it was awesome casting.
I did too.
Gal Gadot got casted. Everybody was freaking out about that, which I understood, but at the same time, I was like, it's Wonder Woman. She should be able to pull that off if they saw something in her. Why would they choose a model to play the most famous female superhero when they could have anybody they wanted? And then the movie came out, and just like you said, it was like, okay, you got Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman in the same movie. You should be able to sleepwalk backwards through this and have a fucking awesome movie. Right. So somewhere along the lines, they went off the rails. Now, I know you haven't seen the Ultimate Edition yet, but I saw the Ultimate Edition, and I thought it was a much better, much more cohesive movie. That being said, the ultimate problems of the movie were still there.
Right.
Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor was still there. The big Martha revelation, okay, we're friends now because we have the same mom name, is still there. All the shit, which I can't believe nobody's brought up, but it drove me nuts every time I watched the movie. That whole last 30 minutes where Lois Lane kept trying to hide that fucking spear just drove me nuts. You know what I mean? She tries to hide the spear, and then she tries to get the spear because somehow she knows that she's supposed to get the spear, and then she almost drowns getting the spear, and then Superman saves her, and then almost drowns getting the spear, and it was ridiculous. But nonetheless, they dropped the ball with Batman v Superman, which should have been what they were intending that to be. Is okay, if we can knock this bitch out of the park, we can catch up to Marvel with one movie instead of having a Aquaman movie, a Flash movie, a Batman movie, a couple Superman movies, a Wonder Woman movie, and then a Justice League movie in 2023. So we'll go ahead and knock it all out in one movie. As long as we do it really good, then we're good. We can go and do the side stories later. And then they fucked that up. So then they're in the situation where, okay, we got Suicide Squad that's already in the can. And we're starting shooting on Justice League in like 2 weeks, which was ridiculous for them to schedule a sequel to start shooting before they even get an audience reaction for the movie they've already got out. So then they have all these reshoots with Suicide Squad, and there was rumors that it was trying to put all this fun and all these jokes and everything in it, because that's what everybody was saying about Batman v Superman, was that it was too dark, it was too somber, there was no fun. And then, with Justice League, they started doing the same thing. They said, whoa, we're going to take this person out. We're going to put Jeff Johns here. We're going to put Ben Affleck in the executive producer. We're going to restrict Zack Snyder a little bit. We're going to inject this fun. We're going to put jokes here. And what I'm getting at is Warner Brothers' biggest problem to me is that they're too reactionary. They're waiting for everybody else to tell them how to make their movies.
Well, you nailed it. You nailed it a while ago. You said that they did one film to try to play catch up with Marvel. Their problem is that they tried to play catch up with Marvel.
Exactly.
No, Batman should have got his own movie. That clearly we know that Batman vs Superman started as a Superman film.
Yeah, it did.
Then they shoehorned Batman in. They shoehorned Wonder Woman in. As you know, Cody, I am educated in screenwriting. So
yeah. Oh yeah.
So I could see a sloppy script.
Oh yeah.
And it's no more apparent that it was made by committee. That film. It literally was, hey, we should just throw them all in there. It'll be cool. But no, it's not cool because it was a mess, dude. It was a mess. I really, I kind of feel like I don't have the same problems that a lot of people have with the film. I don't mind that it's dark, whatever, There was a time in comics where they were dark. Frank Miller was writing Batman. If you read Year One, that is a grim, grim book.
Oh, yeah, and Dark Knight Returns and all that stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff. I'm not a fan of Dark Knight Returns, but...
Neither am I.
But anyways, that's another problem is I feel like they're drawing too much from Dark Knight Returns. But again, that's a whole other issue. Trying to play catch up. The films are obviously being made by committee. Warner Brothers getting in the way of the directors, their vision. Even though, David Ayer is saying that they didn't and that's his cut, I don't buy it.
I don't buy it either.
He's being a good guy. He wants, to be hired.
Which I respect him for that because I feel like it's become a trend over the past about year and a half. You You had Batman v Superman. You had Fantastic Four. You had Avengers: Age of Ultron, even to a degree where, the movie came out and critics said, well, this didn't work, and the director's like, whoa, those problems are the studio's problems. My movie didn't have those problems. Mm-hmm. And, they hacked it up, or they changed this, or, I wanted to do this, but they made me do this. And even though that's true, after you hear it so many times, it becomes boy cried wolf, for one. And then, two, it seems like they're being a bad sport. So I respect, even though, just like you, I said that on a previous episode that I think that's bullshit. I think he had his own cut. I think all these deleted scenes that they're talking about now, and all the scenes you can remember from the first 3 trailers that's not even in the movie, that he obviously had another cut. But I think he's just, like you said, he's coming out to be a good sport. He's coming out to say, okay, I'll take the bullet. This is my movie. Don't wait around expecting the David Ayer Ultimate Edition cut on Blu-ray in 3 months, which I still think we're going to get, but I think they're smart for not. With Batman v Superman, I wasn't even halfway through the movie in the theaters before they were announcing that shit. Like, hey, the real cut's coming to Blu-ray in a few months, guys. So yeah, that's another thing with reactionary. It's like, oh, they didn't like it. Well, shit, give them the real one.
This is the age of Twitter now, so there is no filter. So you have Joss Whedon saying, like, oh, I'm done with Marvel. Or you have certain actors saying, like Jim Carrey came out and slammed Kick-Ass 2, which is fine. It deserved it. It was crap. But, again, like, there's dude, back in the days, you had PR. If you had a PR rep telling you can't say that, and people would be like, all right, fine, like, you still want to work in this town? It's ridiculous, dude. Like I said, we're literally in the age where people just say things and they don't even think about the consequences. So the fact that David Ayer, said, yeah, this is it, this is the cut, and then I think it was him who said, like, oh, there's not going to be a director's cut.
Yeah, that was him.
That's not his decision. That's Warner Brothers' decision. Dude, let's be honest though, that movie's raking in the dough. I don't know how it's doing, the second weekend.
It's tracking to make $45 million, and it's tracking to still be number one with what's the new movie, Pete's Dragon, or maybe it's Sausage Party. Sausage Party is tracking like $30 million. So,
don't get me started on that. That looks awful.
It's like a 67 or 69% drop off, which is expected, but still, making a pretty good amount of money. Yeah,
they'll be okay. We'll get another Suicide Squad movie. You wait and see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and as far as Marvel, now, I like the majority of what Marvel does, but at the same time, I've always been more emotionally tied to the DC side. I like Batman is my favorite superhero. I've always been a huge fan of the Flash. I do love Marvel. I love the Punisher. I love the X-Men. I love Spider-Man. But as far as like the core unit of the Avengers, like you said, the Iron Mans and everything like that, I never really knew who a lot of them. I always knew who Captain America was, but the majority of them I never heard of until Marvel Cinematic Universe said, okay, this is who this person is. So, I've been a big fan of the majority of their movies. I think that Iron Man 2 sucks. I think that Thor 2 is decent. I think that the Hulk is decent. Avengers Age of Ultron I have a lot of fun with, but it's kind of diminishing returns every time I rewatch it. So I'm not somebody who thinks that Marvel's perfect and that Marvel's movies are, the end-all be-all of movies. But I do think that they're smart for having one guy, for the most part, in charge who, like you said, they know the direction they want to take it. They know what they want to stay true to, and he does not let anybody bully him out of that. They had that whole thing with Edgar Wright with Ant-Man, where Edgar Wright had a certain vision, and he said, hey, man, we're going this direction. We need to go this way. And they said, well, okay, well, you let somebody else direct the movie then. I think for the most part, especially now, I think they're pretty much hitting it out of the park with just about every movie now. But a lot of people tend to forget that their earlier movies weren't perfect. Iron Man is great, but like I said, the Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, some people, Thor I like a lot, but that's a movie you're either on board for or you're not. And Captain America First Avenger I also like a lot, but a lot of people think it's just kind of a run-of-the-mills origin story. So really, a lot of their life hung on to whether or not they were going to be able to nail the first Avengers movie. And that was the question that everybody was asking from 2008 until, 2012 we got Avengers. Everybody was like, okay, these movies are good, but you really got to knock that Avengers out of the park, otherwise this shit's going down.
Right.
So, and I think they pretty much knocked the first Avengers out of the park. I love that first Avengers.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so they really once they nailed that one, I think Marvel Cinematic Universe pretty much planted its roots. It's not going anywhere. As far as just movie making too, I respect them a lot because they give directors who haven't had a big shot a chance to do something big. They give their screenwriters and they give their directors the freedom to do what they want with the characters as long as they stick within their universe. Mm-hmm. They give actors like Robert Downey Jr. I mean, shit, he had no career before that movie. They give him a chance to come back. They put Chris Evans on the map. They put Chris Hemsworth on the map. So I like the fact that they kind of celebrate film while they're bringing comic book movies to life. And I like the fact that to me, their movies aren't just cookie cutter comic book movies. They're like, a 70s suspense political thriller starring Captain America. Right. A heist movie starring Ant-Man. So I like that they can cover a big spectrum within the superhero genre, whereas a lot of people is just okay, or a lot of studios is just okay. Superhero movie 1, superhero movie 2, superhero movie 3.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty recent though, if you think about it, because those first few movies they had to follow a certain formula because they were origin stories.
Yeah, exactly.
The second Captain America movie, that's the one that really broke the mold as far as, okay, we're telling a political thriller with this one, and like you said, Ant-Man, was a heist film. I'm sorry, but like that's the one where like I really, really was hoping that Edgar Wright was going to stick to because I love Edgar Wright. My sneaking suspicion is that Edgar Wright, unlike a lot of American comedy directors, he actually has a style and like an artistry to the way he directs. And I kind of have a feeling that, the Marvel heads that be were kind of like, oh, no, I don't think American audiences would appreciate, those kinds of angles or those, because some of that script still feels like him.
Yeah, you're right.
The directing's pretty bland. I mean, I'm, again, as a film snob, I'm kind of like, I could imagine if Edgar Wright was directing this, it would be something kind of pretty special. It was a good movie. I liked Ant-Man, don't get me wrong. But I can't help but think, like, because he's a director that, to me, in my opinion, is probably one of the best comedy directors, I can't help but think, like, maybe he was too much of a director. Whereas with these other guys who they get, not taken away from any of them, but they were able to stick to the template that Marvel Studios has. And they do have a template.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for every Guardians of the Galaxy, which felt like a James Gunn film, it did and it didn't, because most James Gunn films are pretty vulgar.
Oh yeah.
But for every Guardians of the Galaxy, there is an Iron Man 2, or I'm not a huge fan of The Age of Ultron. I'm really not. I want to actually say that when I halfway through watching it, I'm like, I'm kind of done with superhero movies. Like, in all honesty, I'm like, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, the biggest negative that I remember from Age of Ultron, I haven't watched it in a while, was I didn't like Ultron. They built up, especially with that first trailer, if I remember right, you had James Spader's voice, and they had it cut in a way where it was real ominous, I have no strings on me and shit like that. And you're like, damn, this dude might fuck the Avengers up. And it just turned into the typical thing where, okay, you got one major bad guy. It's like a video game. You got one major bad guy, and you got all the little minions. And you just got to push through the minions and kill the one guy, and the rest of them just fall down. And that was kind of what it turned into.
Also, Ultron's just a really strange villain to go with for your second big movie. But the unfortunate thing with Marvel is that back in the 90s, to stay afloat, the company sold out the film rights to their characters. So Fox got as you know. They
X-Men
got
and
the
Fantastic
X-Men
Four.
and Fantastic Four, and I want to say they had somebody else too. I can't remember. Daredevil. Did Fox have Daredevil? I don't remember. Or New Line. Somebody had Daredevil. Somebody had Blade. Sony had Spider-Man. And with that came all the villains, all the side characters. You can't say mutant. You know, you can't say Scarlet Witch is a mutant. You can't say Quicksilver's a mutant.
Yeah, metahuman.
Right. Or Inhuman, right?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, you know, that's how they had to make money. Toy Biz, a toy company who was making their toys, bought them. So they were going through financial hardships. And now they're still kind of just stuck. You know, they can't use... they can't use Doctor Doom. Dude, like, come on. You can't use the Fantastic Four. You can't use the X-Men. Like, that's insane. They can't use their own creations. Luckily, in all honesty, when that Sony hack happened and we heard that there was buzz that they were talking with Marvel to get Spider-Man over there in their cinematic universe so they could do it right, there was buzz and people were excited. So I kind of feel like the excitement from that hack is what got us Spider-Man in, you know, Captain America Civil War.
It definitely, you know, that news definitely came out of nowhere because it was one of those things where people were like, dude, like, I know Sony's in a lot of shit, but that's Sony's biggest cash cow, so I don't know if they're ever going to do that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you know, Marvel and Sony have made a deal, and it was like, holy shit, are you fucking kidding me? So, and, you know, there's a lot of rumblings now that X-Men might be going through the same thing, but I don't tend to believe that one because I don't think Fox is anywhere near the financial situation that Sony was in. You know, I think Fox would do well to get rid of Fantastic Four. Yeah. And which I have notes for my upcoming news episode where the producer, Simon Kinberg, is still holding strong that, yeah, we're going to do another Fantastic Four. And Miles Teller's like, well, yeah, I mean, I'll come back for another one. And it's like, how the fuck can you follow that? Like, even if that movie turned out to be perfect, if they got a new screenwriter, if they got a new director, and they had everybody on board, you know, Fox took their hands out of it and let whatever director they choose direct the movie, how can anybody go see that with the stench of that first movie hanging behind it? So I don't know. I think that's bullshit. But as far as the X-Men, I don't think they're in anywhere near the position to want Marvel's help. You know, even if, you know, there was mixed response to X-Men Apocalypse. I enjoyed it. It wasn't perfect, but the big thing that happened this year was Deadpool. You know, Deadpool came out and blew everybody's minds, which, you know, we'll get into that in just a second. But yeah, I don't think Fox is going to be looking for a deal like that anytime soon. But I do. They don't have to. Yeah, exactly. I do wish that Doctor Doom, especially, I'm not too fond of the Fantastic Four characters, but Doctor Doom as the villain, I think, could do some serious good in the MCU.
Yeah, I mean, we could have Doctor Doom, we could have Silver Surfer, we could have the Skrulls, the Kree. You know, you can have all these characters that are iconic to Marvel comics in Marvel movies. Like, in a perfect world, we would have everything under Marvel Cinematic Universe's umbrella, right? We'd have Wolverine in the Avengers. You would have the X-Men crossing over. It's great big. I mean, you know, the Infinity War should have everybody in it. Yeah. Right? But it's not gonna. And that's the unfortunate thing that we're dealing with. Whatever. It is what it is. But, yeah. I mean, what can you say about that?
Exactly. Well, before we move on to start talking about the superhero movie slate, let's talk a little bit about the TV universe because we started to get into that slightly. We'll start with talking about DC's TV, and then we'll start talking about Marvel. So as far as me, I don't know if you still continue to watch Arrow or The Flash. I love The Flash. It's not perfect, but I enjoy the hell out of it. For a sci-fi, time travel, superhero kind of mishmash show, it keeps me watching every single week. Now, Arrow was a show that I was on board with for the first 2 seasons, and I was singing its praises. You gotta watch Arrow, you gotta watch Arrow, it's crazy. And then season 3 came along, and about halfway through season 3, I started to have that feeling like, oh shit, is this going to be one of those shows where I have to fight to get through now? And I fought through the rest of season 3, and I held out hope for season 4, and I think I got maybe 13 episodes through season 4, and I was like, dude, I'm done with this show. Like
Yeah.
they're just, I don't know if you still watch it, but it was just getting to the point where like it lost all the darkness and all the edge from the first 2 seasons. The villains weren't nearly as good. You know, the flashback sequences were a complete waste of time. They never held any water to the current story. They've put way too much focus on Laurel Lance, and they got rid of her sister. And their explanation for that was, well, you know, they had, I forget her sister's name, but you know, she was the original Black Canary, and she was trained by the League of Assassins, and she was on the same island as Oliver, and you know, she could match wits and match fighting styles with Oliver. And then, you know, spoiler alert, she dies in season 3. And they bring in Laurel Lance. She takes a few boxing lessons, and all of a sudden she can match her sister. And it was like, wait, what? And not only that, but it seemed like every 4 episodes, Oliver was telling somebody else new about his secret identity and bringing somebody else into Team Arrow. So Team Arrow was no longer Oliver, Diggle, and Felicity. Now it's like 18 people. And it was just, it started to lose everything that they built in those first 2 seasons. And I can't speak too much on the Legends of Tomorrow show. I haven't watched any of it yet. There was so much TV going on at once, I figured I'd wait till that one came out on Blu-ray and catch that one. And then now we got the Supergirl show coming over to CW. So I enjoy The Flash a lot. The other shows I either don't watch anymore or haven't picked up yet. But as far as the way that they're going about it, where, you know, they've gotten everybody on board with Grant Gustin as the Flash, and then immediately after everybody was like, oh, I love this show, they were like, oh, and we got this other guy playing the Flash too, and the movie universes, they're not the same.
Right.
And even though I think Ezra Miller is going to do really good, they're doing a really weird approach with having one DC universe on TV and one DC universe on movies. And I think for the most part people will understand it, but I at least like the way that Marvel, even though you're never going to see Daredevil and Jessica Jones and Luke Cage show up in the Avengers, they at least acknowledge the movies. And, you know, they do it in a way where the writers' hands aren't tied, where, okay, the Avengers 3 just did this, so now we got to change all our fucking storyline because this person doesn't exist anymore, or, you know, anything like that. So that's the only thing that I think is going to cause a problem in the long run for DC.
Right. Going back to Arrow and all the shows, when Arrow first came on, we were all like, yeah, like this is good. This is a good show, you know. This will do.
Yeah.
Because Smallville sucked. I mean, I'm sorry, it has its fans, but like, we never saw him in the Superman getup, you know. But anyways, back to Arrow. Arrow was good. The first season was okay. Second season was awesome.
Yeah.
That's when I hopped on, and then I went back and watched the first season. Then The Flash came on. And The Flash was so good that it made Arrow look like shit. Because even though The Flash isn't perfect, they nailed the feeling of a comic book TV show. You literally watch it like, okay, it's got the budget of a TV show, but it's so well done. It's fun. It's quick. I like the supporting characters. I like him as Flash. Arrow just kind of fell to the wayside because it couldn't compete. It just couldn't compete. Legends of Tomorrow I watched. It's fun. I'm not following it really, but from what I saw, it was fun. But I've heard mixed things about it.
Yeah.
As far as the way they treat their movies and TV universes separately, as a DC fan for about 25 years now, I'm used to multiverses.
Yeah.
So, you know, the idea of Earth 1, Earth 2, and Earth Prime Superman all existing at the same time, you know, Supergirl Superman existing at the same time as Man of Steel Superman, totally normal to me. And in a way, I think it's smart because they can go back to that, right? Whereas with Marvel's got to like, okay, we killed off this agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. in this, so he can't be on this anymore. And it's like, dude, that's a lot of work.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Thank God they're doing it justice, but that's a lot of work to keep your TV shows, your movies, and your Netflix shows all in line together. That's a lot of work. And they're doing it with Star Wars as well because the comics, the games from here on, and the movies are all in a shared universe.
Yeah.
So, know.
Well, my concern with that, and I understand the whole Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth, you know, infinite Earths. storyline and all that kind of stuff. But from what I could tell, and obviously they could change their mind. I mean, like I said, DC's reactionary. Everything that they've come out with saying is that they're not even going to acknowledge the TV series. Is like there's not going to be a moment in the Flash movie where he goes through the Speed Force and you see a flash of Grant Gustin and everybody's like, oh, that's how they do it. Okay, so to me that's what I'm worried about, is that they're just going to expect that everybody's just going to understand from that everybody who sees the movie must watch the Flash, so they're going to understand Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3. Which I might be getting ahead of myself. Who knows what they're going to go into with the Flash movie? But that's,
they are. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's my only concern, is that they're going to, they could easily do that and free themselves of all the shackles of keeping up with the TV universes. Okay, TV universe is Earth 1, movie universe is Earth 4, or something like that. So, but I don't think, at least from what they're saying so far, that they're even going to bother with that. They're just going to. Yeah, whatever. You do your DC TV universe, we're going to do our stuff.
Yeah, I don't think they could ever publicly say that, because it's just going to confuse people who don't read the comics. Because to me, the comics are the word, basically. Like that's the Earth that I know, and it's completely separate from the TV show. It's completely separate from the movies. It is creating some brand confusion, because if a new Batman movie comes out, or let me say, if a new Superman movie comes out, and then like your aunt or somebody says like, well, I saw Superman on TV, do I need to watch the TV show to watch the movie? Because that's going to happen.
Oh yeah.
There's brand confusion there. It is kind of painting themselves in a corner, but again, I kind of feel like Marvel's painting themselves in the corner by connecting everything.
Yeah. Now something interesting with Marvel, so we'll transition over to that. I don't watch the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I've seen all the Netflix shows. I'm looking forward to Luke Cage. I don't know anything about Iron Fist, but the Marvel brand and the Netflix Marvel brand is what's going to keep me watching. Right. And I liked Daredevil season 1. I wasn't over the moon about it, but I had not yet read the comics. Now that I've read, The Man Without Fear and stuff like that, I think I could go back and appreciate it much more. I loved Jessica Jones season 1. I thought it was better than Daredevil. I'm one of the few. And then Daredevil season 2 came out, and I was like, Jessica who? You know what I mean? Daredevil season 2 was the shit to me. At least the first 2/3 of it. And so I think that's pretty much all the Marvel shows. But what's interesting about that is, when they first came out with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything, they pretty much said, okay, yes, everything that happens in the MCU is going to transition into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Everything that happens in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to transition into MCU. And then, I forget the guy's name, but it was basically the guy that Kevin Feige had to answer to for the longest time, got shifted out of the way, and he was put in charge of TV, and Kevin Feige kind of had the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. shackles taken off. And ever since that happened, apparently, like I'm not watching the show, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. became the Inhumans show, and everything in the MCU, Kevin Feige's like, I'm doing my own fucking thing. I don't care if it ties in with what they're doing or not. And everybody who works on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of like, dude, we're trying to be team players, and you guys aren't helping us. And this, at least from what I'm reading. And so that's interesting to me. And like I said, I like the fact that at least on their Netflix shows, they acknowledge the universe by just like little tiny snippets, like, oh yeah, that big green guy, or just little nuggets there. But they don't do enough to where, if they destroy New York City in Avengers 3, they don't really have to acknowledge it. They just, okay, the event, I think is what they called it whenever they were they were discussing, the Chitauri stuff from Avengers 1.
It's interesting because the ABC shows, I didn't watch Agent Carter, but I heard it was good, the first season anyway.
That was the other show. I knew there was one more. I was forgetting.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I think I watched the first 3 episodes of season 1, and I'm just like, nah, I'm good. I'll pass. It's not necessary. The Netflix shows, though, I kind of feel like that, in a really strange way, is what I prefer over the movies. Yeah. Because comic books are episodic. And they have longer to tell a story. It almost feels like like a run, when a writer has a run on a comic, he has like 6 to 12 to sometimes 24, even longer issue runs on a story. So it kind of feels like that to me. And at the same time, too, they seem to be much more bold with their shot choices and their camera movements and their scripts and what they could say, and I just prefer it even to the movies at this point.
I'll be honest with you, I think I prefer it too. I love the Marvel movies, but it did not do Batman v Superman any favors that Daredevil season 2 came out pretty much the same weekend, because then you're watching Daredevil versus Punisher, and then you got Batman v Superman, and just that one episode, I think it was episode 3, where the whole episode takes place on the roof, and it's just a conversation between, Matt Murdock's version of how things should go and Frank Castle's versions of how things can go, and they're just having a conversation for 60 minutes. There was more deep storytelling and more emotion and more battle of wits and more entertainment in that 1 hour of TV than in the 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of Batman v Superman. So,
and it was also very, very faithful to, I want to say, the Marvel Knights run when they met, or when they had a little show off on the rooftop. Going again to what they're doing right is they're staying faithful to the source material. The Punisher felt like the Punisher. Obviously now, if we want to go back to the Thomas Jane Punisher, which to me was a fucking disaster, I can't stand that movie because it didn't feel like the Punisher to me. This version of the Punisher feels like the Punisher. They got it right. Matt Murdock feels like Matt Murdock. They got it right.
And what was funny for me too is because you had recommended me to read the Garth Ennis run in Punisher and Welcome Back Frank, and I whenever the Thomas Jane Punisher came out, I liked it because that was the only Punisher that I had ever known. I never saw the Dolph Lundgren movie. I never even saw the Punisher Warzone movie. So I was like, oh, this is cool. Why don't they ever do a sequel to this? And I remember I always heard people shitting all over it, and I was like, what is the deal with it? What's so wrong with it? And what was funny to me is, and I loved Daredevil season 2, but and this wasn't my criticism because I like different takes on characters, but I read a lot of criticism from people who, like me, grew up with the Thomas Jane Punisher. They're like, dude, this Punisher just seems like a whack job. He just seems like he just wants to kill everybody. And I was like, well, it's something different. And then I read the comics, and I was like, oh, fuck, that's what the Punisher's supposed to be like.
This dude he's heavily damaged. He lost everything.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got nothing to lose.
Yeah, I was reading Welcome Back Frank, and, it totally blindsided me. I was like, oh, they tried to do this in the Punisher movie. And they had all the storylines and all the characters and everything, and I was like, oh, man, it was kind of an interesting read. I'm flipping through the pages, and it was like reading what the movie was supposed to be. And that kind of, I gained a new appreciation for what John Bernthal's doing, and it kind of made me laugh. Like, now I'm one of those guys who laughs at all the reviews, like, that's not the Punisher, he's supposed to be like Thomas Jane, and I'm like, yeah, you don't read the books. So it was kind of like I get to join that club now. Yeah. But let's talk a little bit.
You said you never watched Warzone?
No, I never watched Warzone. Is it worth watching?
It's interesting because it's very divisive. Some people hate it. Some people like it. I'm in the group that actually likes it because it is, I forget the actor's name, but he's the right age for Frank Castle. He's got the right look.
It's Ray Stevenson?
Ray Stevenson, yeah. He's got the right look. It's got the right feel of the comics at that time. So now that you've read Garth Ennis's run on The Punisher, go back and watch that movie.
Okay.
Because I think you'll appreciate it because it's pretty grim and it's got some gore in it. I think it's worth watching. Okay,
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit now. We're going to get into the slate of superhero movies. So we'll talk about the movies that have come out so far this year, and then we'll start getting into the movies pretty much up until about 2020, and we'll kind of give our thoughts on it. So back in February, we had Deadpool come out. Now, Deadpool was a movie that I'd been looking forward to for a long time. I've never read Deadpool. I still have not read any Deadpool, but I love Ryan Reynolds. I loved what he was trying to do in X-Men Origins, but was not allowed to do. And after that movie, after I kind of started learning who Deadpool was. Deadpool's the meme superhero. He was showing up in Facebook all the time, and I was seeing little jokes here, and I played the video game Deadpool, and I'm like, dude, Ryan Reynolds was born to do this guy. When is this movie coming out? And at least for me, I thought Deadpool was probably still to date my favorite superhero that's come out so far this year. My superhero movie.
Yeah. Interesting thing about Deadpool is I've always hated him.
Yeah.
I've always hated the shtick. I hated the memes. I hated everything about Deadpool, the character, because when Deadpool first came out, I have the issue. I actually have the comic of his first appearance.
I do too.
And I just never really cared for him. But I really, really liked the movie. Mm-hmm. And I really, really liked the enthusiasm and the love and the care that Ryan Reynolds had for the character. Mm-hmm. The marketing, his interviews, the promotions for it, you could tell he had his heart and soul into this.
Yeah, that movie probably had the best marketing campaign of any movie ever. He was showing up on The Bachelor. He was showing up at, baseball games as Deadpool. I mean, it was like once that movie was done shooting, he became Deadpool until the movie premiered.
Yeah, and that's what you want. I mean, us comic book nerds are passionate people, so when somebody as mainstream as Ryan Reynolds shows love for, a comic book character, we're going to be 100% behind you. Mm-hmm. And I just enjoy it. Like I said, I wasn't a Deadpool fan. I watched it with my wife. My wife enjoyed it. That's saying something because she doesn't read comics.
Yeah, it was the same thing with Holly. Holly doesn't read comics. She knows what she knows because I've told her, or because she's watched the movies with me, or she lives vicariously through me. And before Deadpool was coming out, I was talking about it all the time. I'm like, man, I can't wait for Deadpool. I can't wait for Deadpool. And she loves Ryan Reynolds. She watched me play the game. She's like, man, I really want to see this movie. Is this the guy that Ryan Reynolds is playing? He's going to kill it. And me and her went and saw it at the first opportunity that we could, and we both just loved it. We were laughing. We were, grinning ear to ear from start to finish. That movie, it doesn't have a deep storyline. It doesn't do anything new as far as storyline. It's just, okay, a guy, something bad happens to him. He wants revenge, and he wants to get his girlfriend back, essentially. But all the little in-jokes there, even the way they opened the movie, directed by an overpaid ass clown, starring a CGI character and, stuff like that. Just the fact that they were so aware of what movie they needed to make, and they weren't afraid to make that movie, making it hard R and all that kind of stuff. To me, that movie just, going on pure enjoyment factor, was just phenomenal.
Yeah, and the most important thing, they stayed true to the comic book characters, because that was the best depiction of Colossus I have ever seen.
The gentleman.
He's a gentleman. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
He's got the accent. He's a huge, he's a giant. He could probably stop anybody, tear Deadpool in half. This guy is like a gentleman. He sees a titty and he's like, oh.
Yeah. He's like, oh, we got to cover that up before we keep fighting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it was so well done. I can't say enough good things about that film. I really like it, and that's kind of what gave me hope that Fox will start treating the X-Men properties right. I wasn't a huge fan of Age of Apocalypse. I thought it was okay. Mm-hmm. I almost felt like, okay, I'll go see it because my friend wanted to see it, and I'm like, okay, I'll go for it. I wasn't a huge fan of the one before it. What was before? It was Days of Future Past, right? Mm-hmm. I just thought it was okay. I actually really enjoyed the Wolverine. I thought that was kind of cool.
I did too.
I liked it, but at the same time, it felt like it was missing something. It was missing the.
I think it was missing Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, I mean, you did get to see him run and rage out. And run.
Yeah, exactly.
In the theaters when we went to go see that, when he ran out, when Jean, he had that little moment with her, and then he goes and running out, and I just went, oh, because it literally looked like it was like some kind of Family Guy here just ran out crying.
Yeah,
but we were literally we had the church giggles when we were watching the movie because I did that out loud. Anyway. It wasn't faithful. It didn't feel like any of the. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. let's be honest, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But other than him, like, none of the characters felt like the characters that they were supposed to be. So hopefully they course correct from Deadpool on now. Like, okay, let's start over.
Mm-hmm. Well, while we're talking about X-Men, we'll skip to that one real quick. We'll I really loved X-Men 1 and X-Men 2. X-Men 3 and X-Men Origins Wolverine, I think universally is hated. And
I never saw Origins.
Origins is garbage. They had a few good ideas, but it's laughable to the point, some of the things in that movie. And, everybody came out and jumped all over X-Men First Class's dick, and I was one of the only people who did not. I liked some things about it. I loved Michael Fassbender. I loved James McAvoy. Did not like Jennifer Lawrence. I thought Kevin Bacon did pretty good, but what annoyed me so much about that movie is what annoyed me about the Ghostbusters remake, is that there was so many nods and wink moments to the original 3 movies that it was so distracting. They had a scene where where the scene where they come up with everybody's names, where Jennifer Lawrence just comes out and she's like, "Hey, I was thinking you should be Magneto, and you should be Professor X, and you should be this person." I was like, really? And then you got, the thing at the end where she's like, you're not G-Men, you're X-Men. And the camera kind of stopped and she's like, ding, and winks. Those things keep me from loving that movie. Even though I think the Cold War storyline, getting back to a more serious story, and like I said, the 2 lead actors were great. X-Men Days of Future Past I like a lot more now, but it's a very hard movie to transition into because it's such a huge change of pace. It goes from a big action spectacle, X-Men was primarily an action sci-fi kind of franchise, and then with Days of Future Past it tried to be more of a thinking man's movie, more of an espionage, a lot of talking, and I appreciate it a lot now when I watch it, but it was a huge change of pace, and it was kind of like a brick in the face if you weren't expecting it. And then with X-Men Apocalypse, their promise with that storyline was kind of getting back to that action spectacle movie. And they had kind of a large bill to fill because they had to recast the majority of the original X-Men, and they had to bring arguably the X-Men's biggest villain to life, and they had to pretty much possibly wrap up the storyline with Charles Xavier and Mystique and Magneto all in one movie. And they succeeded on some fronts and failed on some fronts. I thought that there was some scenes where I was on board with Apocalypse. There was some scenes where it's like, okay, this guy's not threatening. He's just there. And the biggest weakness in that movie was by far Jennifer Lawrence. In all 3 of the movies, I felt like she was trying harder in Days of Future Past. She was moving more like Rebecca Romaine. She was actually kind of doing what she was supposed to be doing as Mystique. She was actually in the fucking makeup for the most part. And then with X-Men Apocalypse, I was actually like, I remember I was like throwing my arms up in the theater every time I saw her as Jennifer Lawrence. It was like, okay, do they not have any control over this woman? Like, I think she's a really good actress, but you can tell that she's got power over these people saying, okay, she probably said in my contract, if you want me back for this fucking movie, I'm only going to wear the makeup for 2 hours, 2 days a week. And you got 2 scenes with me in the makeup. So do what you got to do to write that into the movie. And go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is perfect because this actually goes back to one of my major problems with Hollywood's take on comic book films, is that again, most of the time Mystique is blue in the comics because that's who she is. Also, really quick, Mystique is not that important as far as the history of the X-Men is. It's obviously the Jennifer Lawrence show now, but even like Iron Man, you always see Tony with the faceplate up, and you see Robert Downey Jr.'s face. Like, unfortunately, that's Hollywood. It's the face of the actor that sells the film. At least that's what they think. To me, personally, these characters are older, and they transcend the actors that play them.
Yeah, the characters are bigger than the actor.
Exactly. So, it's such a pet peeve of mine, though. Like, even going as far back as Spider-Man 3, when Topher Grace was playing Eddie Brock Venom.
Yeah, and it would come off his face every time he had to talk.
Dude, Yeah, I mean, come on. Eddie Brock hardly ever showed his face when he had the symbiote costume on, so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it drove me fucking nuts as far back as that. So I'm like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
But that unfortunately, my problem with the X-Men films is that it stinks of celebrity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Again, like just like you said with Jennifer Lawrence, dude, I love her.
Mm-hmm.
I love everything about Jennifer Lawrence, but the X-Men movies, if it means it's gonna cost me as the audience member to lose the believability or lose myself into your story.
Exactly. Yeah, it takes you right out of the movie.
So,
We got
that's my little issue.
Yeah, it takes you right out of the movie whenever you see her do that, and that's what I kept throwing my arms up about, because there were scenes where I'd have to watch the movie again, but I think there were specific scenes where she would be blue 1 second and then she would turn right back into her little 80s, I don't know where I am in life outfit. And like you said, she's not that important of a character, and what was laughable was even after the movie came out and everybody pretty much was slamming, dude, Jennifer Lawrence is sleepwalking through this. Jennifer Lawrence doesn't want to be here. Jennifer Lawrence isn't wearing the makeup. And it was like a week later, and, what's the name of the director? I can't think of his name.
Bryan Singer.
Bryan Singer. Bryan Singer came out saying, yeah, we got prospects of a Mystique standalone movie on the back burner, and everybody had like a collective no. Like,
yeah, I hope he heard it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that was almost like his trying to be clever way of like having her back, I guess. But and then I even read reports that were like Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy weren't going to come back if she doesn't come back, and it's just like, God, please stop. And but the third act of that movie is really where it fell apart, because I was on board with all the new X-Men. I liked the new Scott Summers. I really liked, which I wasn't expecting to, the new Jean Grey. I thought she was gonna just sound like Game of Thrones. And I really liked the new Nightcrawler. So I was on board with that side of the story. I would have preferred seeing a whole movie with just them. I liked the Wolverine cameo, but I feel like I already said, Hugh Jackman's presence was missed. I think he's a big driving force in the other movies that he's in. And in the third act, even though the first two acts, Magneto's storyline was the best part of the whole movie, like the whole thing with his wife and his daughter, and where he swung that locket around and him going just on this revenge tale, and you believed that he would just give up all hope and join somebody like Apocalypse. At the third act of the movie, he was just floating around with shit floating around him. He was just kind of doing this for half an hour. And then he changed sides out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden him and Charles are best buddies again out of nowhere, and just kind of, like you said, it reeked of celebrity. It felt like it was too much ideas to fit into one movie, and it felt like there was also a little bit too much focus for setting up whatever they're trying to do next.
Right.
So yeah, I walked away enjoying it for the most part, but it was definitely not. It was not as good as it should have been. And then, so we'll go back to, which we've already talked a little bit about, but we can get into it in more depth. So after Deadpool, we had in March Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, which I know going into that I was, in a word, hopeful. I wasn't going out saying that, no, this movie is going to rock, everybody's going to suck it, Zack Snyder's a genius, and this is going to be the greatest thing in the world. I was nervous about some things. I was nervous about Jesse Eisenberg. I was nervous about how much storyline they were trying to cram into that movie. I was nervous about what else was I nervous about? I was nervous about that trailer that came out that basically gave the entire plot of the movie away and even showed Doomsday. Yeah. So after that trailer come out, I was like, ugh, because that first trailer came out, and I feel like it kind of gave everybody hope. Even the ones that were nervous about it, they were like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Seeing Bruce Wayne running into the fog whenever the buildings were collapsing, and everything like that. But they gave away the best action scene of the movie in that second trailer with Batman storming that warehouse and taking everybody out. They gave away the third act villain of Doomsday. They showed the team together, which totally took away the weight of the title Batman versus Superman, because you go, okay, well, they're going to be friends at some point, I guess, which everybody expected, but you shouldn't see it in the trailer. So they kind of it's like they were blowing their wad before the movie even came out. They were trying to get everybody, okay, we got this in here, and we got this in here, and we got this in here. Please come see our movie. And, you know, had the studio let Zack Snyder put his cut out, I think it would have been better critically received, even though I understand they wanted to keep it to 2.5 hours so they could play it more times in a day. On the flip side of that, if they told Zack Snyder we don't want a 3-hour cut, he shouldn't have made a 3-hour cut. He should have made a movie that could be cohesive in 2.5 hours. But it was a gigantic mess, like we were talking about earlier. So, I mean, what were your thoughts going into Batman v Superman before you saw the movie?
Well, let's see. I saw it the Tuesday after it came out, and by that point, a lot of people had already seen it, and a lot of the reviews already came out, and they were all negative. Everything I heard was negative, with the exception of one friend. I think that weekend saw it like 3 times, 4 times, because he's a big DC fan. Yeah.
I can't imagine watching that movie 4 times.
Dude, he watched the weekend that Suicide Squad came out. He's probably going to listen to this. The weekend that Suicide Squad came out, I'm pretty sure he saw it at least twice.
Well, Suicide Squad's a fun movie, so I can understand seeing that one. Like, even though there's problems with it, it's enjoyable and there's things that you want to revisit. But Batman v Superman is just so, it's like a big weight on your shoulders when you're watching it. You're like, fuck. It's like you have to like drink a monster to get through it.
Yeah, it's taxing. It really is. But you know what? I don't hate it as much as a lot of other people do, but I see its flaws. I see the flaws, and the flaws to me are, I'm not a huge Zack Snyder fan. I do like his Dawn of the Dead. I did like 300 when I first saw it.
Did you like Watchmen?
I'll be honest with you, I've never seen it.
Wow.
Watchmen was one of those comics that I read really early on, and I'm like, I'm good. I don't need to see a movie. But nothing's really stopping me from watching it. I kind of, actually, now that I stop and think about it, I wouldn't mind owning it on Blu-ray and watching it, you know?
I love The Watchmen. You know, I haven't read the book yet, but that was such a different superhero movie to me. We won't go on a tangent on The Watchmen, but I feel like that's part of the problem with what Zack Snyder's trying to do with the DC universe is he's trying to make Batman and Superman into The Watchmen. You know, he's trying to inject violence and darkness and sex and, you know, deities and, you know, Superman's a god figure and all this kind of stuff, and it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just that, but he obviously is a really big fan of a certain era of DC Comics, which was the era of Watchmen, the era of The Dark Knight Returns. You know, I mean, he's a fan of like the gritty stuff. Like, this is coming after the Silver Age, right? Which was all like rain and sunshine and hope and Superman, you know, after the Christopher Reeves movies, you know. Yeah. So I think he kind of felt like it was his duty to like, okay, well, now I'm going to bring it into that era, the darker area, darker era. The only problem is, like I said earlier, this was supposed to be a Superman film.
Yeah.
You know, so we don't get a lot of Superman. We don't get enough, in my opinion, because I feel like
you get a lot more in the Ultimate Edition. That's why eventually I think you should watch it, because that's one of the few flaws that is fixed significantly in the Ultimate cut.
Yeah, we don't get enough for Bruce Wayne, because the parts where Batman is fighting are kick-ass. Like, they're awesome. It was so well done. Never had a problem with Ben Affleck being casted as Batman. Because at least he kept his fucking mask on, right? Yeah. Because he respected the character.
Yeah, he's a Batman fanatic. Yeah, right. Apparently he's got like a bat cave in one of his houses and all kinds of crazy shit. So he's an actor. He's like the Ryan Reynolds. He loves the character and he wants to bring it to life how it should be.
Yeah, I mean, the dude worked with Kevin Smith, who himself is a huge comic book fanboy and is in the business. So it's obvious that like he is a fan. I didn't have a problem with Wonder Woman casting at all, because I'm like, well, let's give her a shot. You know, who knows? You hit the nail on the head. Like, the movie is taxing. It's hard to sit down and like be relaxed and be in it. You know, and halfway through the movie, I'm like, is there something wrong with me? Like, why do I feel exhausted watching this film? Yeah, it's heavy, dude. You're dealing with Christ imagery. You're dealing with, in my opinion, a really bad Lex Luthor. Really bad. You're dealing with some really shitty dialogue. You're dealing with just some really weird editing choices. In the back of my head, I know that everything was shoehorned in. On the plus side, I know people kind of gave it some shit, but I really liked the way they introduced the Flash and Aquaman and Cyborg. I thought that was cool.
I liked the way that they did it in theory. What kind of took me out of it was that the fact that they already created the logos and stuck them on the folders. You know,
Okay,
that was the only
stupid.
that was the only thing I was like, all right, come on. You know what I mean? If he had just had like blank folders on his USB drive and he clicked it open and you had the Flash video and the Aquaman video and the Cyborg video, I think it would have been better. But to me, it was just that small little detail of having the Flash lightning bolt and having the A and having the C and the Wonder Woman thing. I was kind of like, okay.
I just picture him being like, "Here, guys, I created logos for you," and they're like, "Thanks."
Yeah, exactly.
We'll go with this, I guess.
Yeah, have a Jolly Rancher.
Yeah, right. So,
But,
going into this next movie, the Justice League movie, really quick, I'm sure we'll jump into it, but we all know that Batman always has, what's the word I'm looking for? Let's say Superman goes rogue. Batman always has a backup plan.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if they're going to touch on that at all, because it is Snyder's version, and then there are darker, and that's a pretty dark, thing to get into as far as Batman's character. And we already know that this Batman. That's another thing, and I'll get into that right now. This Batman is a very untrusting Batman because he's been through some shit.
Mm-hmm.
We already know that Robin in this movie universe was killed. We don't know what Robin it was. Zack Snyder's Batman, or Zack Snyder's universe is pretty dark, so I can imagine that we're going to see the darker side of Batman that we haven't really seen yet in the movies. So it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get into that here in just a second. So we had Batman v Superman, and it had a lot of negative reviews. And then right around the corner, I don't even think it was a month later, we had Captain America: Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a movie that, everybody was worried about one thing, really. Everybody thought it was going to be great, but they were worried, two things. One was, are they going to nail Spider-Man? And two was, is this going to be a Captain America movie, or is this Avengers 3 that they're just calling Captain America: Civil War? Because, all the marketing was, look how many people we have in this movie. It wasn't really Steve Rogers focused. Now, I walked out of Captain America: Civil War, even though I felt that parts in the middle dragged a little bit. And at the end of the day, since nobody really died, it wasn't as huge of the stakes weren't as huge as I expected them to be. I walked away pretty happy with it. I thought that they focused on Captain America for the most part, so it stayed a Captain America movie. I thought it was a great follow-up to Winter Soldier, which still is probably my favorite of the Marvel movies. I loved what they did with Spider-Man. I'm one of the few people who liked the villain, even though some of his motivations were a little bit convenient towards the end. I liked that it was different. It was just a quiet guy doing things behind the scenes. It wasn't like a mustache-twirling villain like we usually get. And I loved Black Panther. I thought everybody's motivations were there, which they didn't have in Batman v Superman. You knew why Captain America and his team were on his side. You knew why Tony Stark and the people who were on that side believed what they believed. I thought that they did a lot of things really well. So what did you? I know you weren't in love with the movie, but what did you think about Captain America: Civil War?
I enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. It actually kind of got me back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Mm-hmm. Like I said, Age of Ultron, like halfway through, I was like, I'm kind of over this. I saw Ant-Man. I thought Ant-Man was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. Mm-hmm. But I went to a Thursday night viewing of it, and I enjoyed it. There are a few issues there, but they're not really even worth mentioning. I didn't think the villain was all that great. Because to me, like, Baron Zemo is kind of a hard ass, and like they just called him Zemo. He wasn't Baron Zemo. He was just. It just kind of.
He was like Helmet Zemo or something like that. They gave him a different name.
It was weird, right? Mm-hmm. And again, like, as a comic book nerd, my guard is up. So I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that's not the guy I know, Mm-hmm. But I also kind of feel like it's a misnomer naming their movies after comic book events, because
Yeah.
Age of Ultron, the comic book event, is totally different from what we saw in the movie. Civil War in the comics, the stakes are high.
Yeah.
There's death. There's things change. I kind of feel like, why did you name the Civil War? You could have called it something else, you know?
Yeah.
But whatever, they're doing their own thing. Like, I can't really fault them for that. But Spider-Man, I mean, dude, I was happy. Like, I'm like, finally, yes, we got him. Like,
yeah, I was really happy too. I was surprised at how well he worked in, because that could have easily been a shoehorn scene that everybody's like, oh, you just had to throw that shit in there, didn't you? And
well, it was last minute, right? Wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't originally in the script.
I
At least I remember hearing.
I think it was always planned, but I think we were informed late in the game. You know what I mean? I feel like they already knew who was going to be Spider-Man, even though they had reports for weeks about, okay, we got 5 possible people who we're thinking about. And, I feel like they already had all their ducks in a row. They had their casting choice. They had their shooting dates. They had the scenes that they wanted Spider-Man in. I assume that if they, as a backup plan, they probably had a version of the movie without those scenes where they kind of wrote around it, and they had the version of the movie that they wanted to make. And I assume that Black Panther probably would have filled that role had Spider-Man not been there, because he's, from what I heard, I haven't read the comic story yet, but from what I've heard, Spider-Man's kind of the one that you are reading through the eyes of Spider-Man. Like,
Right.
He doesn't really know what side he wants to be on, and
Yeah.
so he wasn't that huge of a role in the movie. He was just kind of, it was an introduction to what to expect later on. But they fit it in well where it made sense with the story. It didn't feel distracting, and it led to a lot of the best scenes of the movie.
Yeah.
So,
Also,
yeah.
thank God for Paul Rudd, because Paul Rudd was awesome in that.
Oh yeah, Paul Rudd was great. Yeah, Giant Man. Yeah, that was awesome. That whole airport sequence was like some of the best action you're going to see in movies ever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That whole thing was awesome. But I the only thing I walked away with that thinking was, they could have killed somebody. Not to be dark, but to solidify how big the stakes were. I knew they weren't going to kill Captain America. I knew they weren't going to kill Tony Stark. But from the trailers, I wasn't thinking they were going to kill Rhodey, because they gave it away in the trailers that he at least gets hurt. But they could have.
Spoilers: he dies in the comics. Ooh, shit! Shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe that was a little wink moment at the comics, like, oh shit, they really killed him, and then oh no, never mind, they gave him astronaut legs at the end. But to me, that was the only misstep that they did. Was, okay, you could have taken this, because they tried to do it with Avengers: Age of Ultron, but they tried to spin it to where it was like a tease, like you thought Hawkeye was going to die the whole movie, and it ended up being Quicksilver. But to me, they haven't had a real emotionally striking death toll in any of their movies yet. And if they have, they've revived them within the same movie. So that was the only missed opportunity to me with Captain America: Civil War. But other than that, I thought it was awesome. But we'll move on from that. We talked about X-Men: Age of Apocalypse. Now, I know you have not seen the movie yet, but like you said, you pretty much have heard, similar like with Batman v Superman, you've heard all the positive, you've heard all the negative, you've heard many different viewpoints on the Suicide Squad.
Right.
So,
I practically know what happens in the damn movie. People have talked about it so much. And, I've told you before, as far as comic book movies are concerned, you can't spoil anything for me. You really can't.
Exactly. So what was your thoughts going into Suicide Squad, like as far as the production, who was casted, what the story choices were, what your worries were, and obviously you can't say what you think about the movie, but from what you're hearing about the backlash, what you think went wrong?
Going into it, I thought it sounded fun. I mean, I think 90% of the people who heard who was directing it, who heard that it was even being made, how it was casted, were totally fine with it. Very optimistic until we saw what Joker looked like, right? When we saw those first images of Jared Leto's Joker, what the fuck is this? Is he like some sort of like white trash pimp rapper thing? Like, what are they going for? Yeah.
And I just heard on an interview too, just to interject for a second. Jared Leto was talking about how he kind of came up with things for the Joker, and the tattoos and the grill and everything like that was all David Ayer. All the different outfits and the laugh and the mannerisms and the voice and everything was Jared Leto. And Jared Leto even wanted to have the Glasgow smile, but David Ayer was really against that. So I think David Ayer was trying to go so far away from Heath Ledger, just so even if he acted similar to Heath Ledger, you could say, okay, he's not copying Heath Ledger. I think that was his main worry.
Well, aside from Fury, David Ayer's films were always kind of like street level, so a lot of them had to do with crime or, what was it, End of Watch was very... I like the movie, End of Watch. Let's go off on a side tangent.
I love End of Watch. End of Watch and Fury, to me, are phenomenal, and I even though it's not nearly as good as the other two we just mentioned, I like Street Kings. I
did too, and I'm partial to movies that take place in Los Angeles, so, but... I kind of like, that's when I heard he was directing. I'm like, okay, it's, and then I saw what Joker looked like. I'm like, oh, it's just like a street level, kind of like a little more down to earth. And then we saw the trailer, and the trailer is all neon and it's crazy looking, and there's music that's cool. And I'm like, okay, I'm totally down with this. It looks like it's got personality. So that was my first impression of it. Did I have any worries? No, when it comes to movies, I mean, I'm always kind of like, I'll see what happens,
Yeah.
So as far as first impressions, that was it. Like, I was hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah, my first impressions, like, I knew who the Suicide Squad was. I never read any comics, but, they appeared multiple times in Arrow. I was aware of the idea of Suicide Squad. There was hints to it in some of the Arkham games with Amanda Waller showing up. I think it was Batman Arkham Origins. So, yeah, I was aware, and I know who Deadshot is. A lot of the Batman villains who were in it, I was already familiar with. I don't think you can find anybody that doesn't know who Joker and Harley Quinn is. Killer Croc I've always known about. Deadshot I've always known about. Captain Boomerang on the lesser side, but I've always known about him, and he showed up in either Arrow or The Flash. I think it might have been their crossover episode, actually. As far as new characters, I'd never heard of, Rick Flag or Katana or Enchantress. So, but I was ready to meet somebody new. But, I was excited about the director choice. I was shocked at the cast that they got. There was a rumor that went out about that cast about maybe a month before the cast was announced, and everybody was like, this is kind of like your fantasy football Suicide Squad cast. And then they finally announced it, and I was like, well, damn, that's fucking badass. And then immediately afterwards, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be the Deadshot movie, starring the Suicide Squad. I love Will Smith. I've always loved Will Smith, aside from what he's done the past 5 or 6 years. But now that all these reports have come out with, Quentin Tarantino's issues with him whenever he was trying to get him to do Django Unchained, and even though the movie was apparently garbage, all the problems that M. Night Shyamalan had with him in After Earth, where every movie he's in now, he wants to change the script to his liking, or he wants this line to be his and not this guy's. He wants, like with Django Unchained, he thought that I should kill Leo DiCaprio's character. I don't want this other guy killing the main villain. I want a scene with my son in it. I want a scene with my daughter in it. I want my wife to have a side role and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, I said, I hope that all the backlash he's gotten and all how his movies have tanked lately, he's going to chill the fuck out for this movie and just be the character. But that was my main worry, was that everybody else was going to get pushed to the background, and Will Smith was going to be like, hey, it's me and the Suicide Squad. So that was my main worry. I wasn't worried about the look of the Joker. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I didn't hate it. I liked the fact that they were trying to do something radically different. Which another thing that I'm going to get into in a further news episode. Now they're coming out with confirming what everybody was already saying about the grill. Okay, that's probably because Batman's knocked his fucking teeth out. So I was okay with the grill. I was okay with the tattoos. I thought they were a little bit on the nose. with the smile and with damage on his head and everything like that. It was a little bit too obvious, I guess. It wasn't really, it wasn't subtle. But I was excited to see what Jared Leto could do, because I know with what he did in Dallas Buyers Club, the guy can transform. So I was really excited to see it. Now, obviously, my review's up. I am not one of the majority. I like the movie a lot. I acknowledge its problems, but it was not the good really outweighed the bad for me. I was laughing the whole movie. I was smiling the whole movie. I was having fun. I wasn't feeling like it was taxing, like with Batman v Superman. I felt like the problems came from WB giving David Ayer 6 weeks to write the script, and also making cuts to his movie to give Deadshot a little bit more of a front focus, because, like I said in my review, it's not detrimental to the movie, but I could tell they took a lot of Jared Leto out of there to make Deadshot seem more prominent. Because if all the deleted scenes that they're coming out with saying were, rumored to be deleted, and all the scenes from those 3 trailers that we saw of the Joker that we didn't get to see in the movie, Harley and Joker would have been the main focus of that movie. So I do think we'll get a second cut of the movie. I just think that they're not trying to distract from the theatrical cut yet. But I thought it was, unfortunately, even though, which I'm not going to get into the Rotten Tomatoes scores, it does not deserve a 27%. But the fact that 27% of critics are on board with this sucks. But to me, if I'm the only critic in the world, it was a good step forward for the DCEU.
Yeah. Interesting thing is, the thing about this film is, once again, it feels like they're trying to play catch up. Catch up.
Catch up.
Reason being is that we should have had Harley and the Joker in a Batman movie. This should not be the way we're introduced to them, because they don't have enough time. Especially not the Joker. The Joker's a big fucking deal in the DC universe.
Oh, yeah.
Right? He deserves to be introduced in his own film with Batman. Had they have done that, then we wouldn't feel the way we do.
Exactly. Yeah. And, and it is unfortunate, too, because the best scene of that whole movie to me was the scene, which it's in the trailer, so it's not really a spoiler, is when Joker and Harley are driving away in that Lamborghini and Batman's on their ass and just trying to take both of them out, because the banter that they have back and forth, and I think the clip's even online so you could watch it, but the banter that they have back and forth about, Harley's screaming at Batman because he's ruining date night, to me was straight out of the animated series.
Right.
It felt like Joker and Harley, and it felt like the way they would react to Batman being behind them. Most criminals freak out, they shoot out the back window, they're trying to swerve to get Batman off, and Joker and Harley are laughing about it, like, this motherfucker again. And that was perfect to me. And if we would have had a Batman movie with that banter throughout the whole thing, like you said, that would have been a great introduction for those Batman and those 2 villains in this universe. And that one movie would have erased all the problems for Man of Steel and Batman v Superman.
Again, like, why play catch up? Like, you've already said that the DC films are doing something entirely different than Marvel, but yet you're trying to catch up with them, and you can't, because the films ultimately are gonna suffer, and hopefully, Wonder Woman will course correct that.
Yeah. Because
now she'll have her own film. My only worry for the Justice League is that it's gonna again feel like an ensemble piece, and we're not gonna get to know Cyborg or the Flash or Aquaman as much as we probably deserve to.
Exactly. Well, that'll do it for our first episode of Alter Egos, guys. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for us going over the upcoming movies by Marvel, DC, and Fox, going all the way to 2020. Tons and tons of movies to talk about. A huge thanks to my co-host Anthony Arviso coming in on a Skype call all the way from California. Always fun debating and talking things with you, man. Comic books, movie related, anything like that. Anthony's got a lot of Hollywood and a lot of comic book knowledge that I'm always enthused to talk about. You know, he's got the background in screenwriting, like he's already stated. He's been into comic books since the early 90s, you know, which is almost as long as I've been alive, so ungodly amounts of knowledge and insight, which makes for a lot of great shows like this. So, like I said, tune in next time, guys. We're going to be going over a ton of movies coming up. Thank you for listening, as always, to the Cody Leach podcast. Go ahead and like and subscribe below on YouTube and SoundCloud. Leave any comments, questions, or your own opinions on these topics down below in the comments section. You can also reach me on Twitter using the hashtag the Cody Leach podcast, and we will see you again on Alter Egos.